Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Steps in Research Methodology. This is lecture number 5. Now we will go ahead and see what are the steps that need to be followed while doing research. First is, as what we learned in the last few lectures, that it was to identify the research problem. Define a clear, specific and researchable problem or question. It can arise from literature gaps, real world issues or theoretical needs. So the first and the foremost thing is that one should be able to identify what to research on. The research problem identification is a must and the foremost thing to do for a researcher. Second is review of literature. A very thorough literature review is required. Study existing research to understand the current knowledge, identify gaps or inconsistencies, avoid duplication, provide a theoretical framework. So, what happens is that when you go through the literature very carefully, you will see what all has been done in the choice area of yours. And then from that you can see, is there any gap that I can fill in? You can identify the gap and then work on that issue which has not been covered by others. Formulating hypothesis or objectives, which means that when you try to understand what is the objective of your research, then only you can work on it. Hypothesis for quantitative research and a testable prediction. Objectives for qualitative research were clear goals outlining what the study aims to achieve. Because unless and until your objectives are clear, you will not be able to make a research plan. So the first thing that is important is that you should have a research topic, a problem. Once having identified that problem, now you have to look for what are your major objectives to achieve through that particular choice of research topic. Fourth step is to make a research design. Decide the overall approach, qualitative, quantitative or mixed methods, experimental, descriptive, correlational, etc. Include variables, control and sampling plans. That means an entire framework of what all you wish to do during your research tenure, that should be written down. It could be qualitative research, it could be quantitative research, but whatever you have decided to do based on the topic that you have chosen, you have to now make a plan whether you want to go ahead with experimental, do you want to do descriptive, do you want to do correlational research, and so on. What are your variables going to be? What are the controls that you want to keep? And what is your sampling size or sampling mode? Because it could be that you are doing on smaller samples, you can be doing on bigger samples, but everything has to be written down like a blueprint. When a blueprint is made for a building, based on that blueprint, the building is constructed. Similarly, you can take an analogy from there and understand that the blueprint of your research plan is your research design. Then, fifth point comes is sampling design. Define the population and choose a sampling method, probability, random or stratified, or non-probability, purposive, convenience, etc. Determine the sample size, which means that everything has to be crystal clear in your mind. What is the sample size that you will take? Whether you will work on milligram scale, or whether you will work on gram scale, or whether you will like to work on kilogram scale if you are a synthetic person. Similarly, if you are working as a dyer, whether you want to make small swatches dyed samples, or you want to dye a meter of cloth, all that should be very well planned ahead, because accordingly you will need all the materials that would be required. So sampling and design of sampling is equally important and cannot be neglected, because you have to understand that it is interdependent. How much of the chemicals you should order, how much of the dye you should take for dyeing a 1 meter sample or a small swatch. So you can understand that sample size is very important to be understood and mentioned in the research plan. Sixth point comes data collection method. You have to decide how to collect data. Primary data, which could be through surveys, interviews, experiments, observations. And secondary data could be published report, archives, databases. Which means that even your data collection has to have a plan. It is not that you can do anything randomly while doing research. And therefore, understanding these steps of research methodology becomes very, very impertinent. Moving on, then we look at the important steps in research design, because research design is the most crucial part of the research plan. After having selected the topic, now you have to make a research design or a research plan. Formulating a research objective or hypothesis. That means now your objectives have to be very well defined. Research objectives define what the researcher aims to achieve. Hypothesis, a tentative statement predicting the relationship between variables that can be tested. Then comes research design. The researcher decides the overall plan or structure of the study. It includes the type of research, such as whether he wants to do exploratory research, descriptive research, or experimental research. All this we have fleetingly discussed in the last few lectures. Now we will delve into it a little deeper to understand what are the processes and how the choices are made. These choices are totally dependent on the plan. It is not, again and again I am telling, nothing is randomly decided when we are doing research methodology. Everything is very methodically, meticulously planned for doing research. And that is how it would lead to good research design or good research methodology, which can actually lead to a constructive research plan, and a constructive research plan can lead to good research. Sampling design. Selecting a sample from the population for study. So, one has to decide what will be the sample size, and secondly, one has to even decide what would be the sampling method, whether it is random, whether it is stratified, whether it is systematic, or any other method. Because unless and until we make a plan, we will not be able to execute according to that plan. If we keep changing the parameters, the variables, the sample size, it becomes impossible to control all other factors because this was not there in the plan. So, if anything is out of the plan, it is like something being out of the syllabus. When you go and sit and write an examination, you are expected to know what is in your syllabus, not things which are beyond the syllabus. So, obviously, you will not be able to answer those questions which are out of the syllabus. Similarly, in research design, everything is planned. Anything which is unplanned can go haywire. Moving on, then we now try to dwell a little deeper. Data collection. Now, what are the different ways of data collection, and which one is going to be most appropriate for my research plan is what the researcher has to decide. Gathering information required for the study. Methods may include surveys, interviews, observations, experiments, questionnaires, and once that is done, it is understood that at least I have made a plan where I can choose surveys and interviews, or I can do totally experimental work, or I can develop a questionnaire, and based on that, how many people's opinion can I take through those questionnaire is something that can help in data collection. Data processing and analysis. This is also a very integral part. Once having got the data in hand, we should know how to handle that data. Collected data is organized, coded, and analyzed using statistical methods or analytical methods. Tools such as tables, graph, and statistical tests are used. Then comes the most important part, interpretation of the results. Many times, students analyze the sample and are not able to interpret the spectra or the chromatogram because they have not been trained for that. Now, during your research tenure of 3 to 5 years, you are expected to be able to be capable of interpreting your own results. Nobody, initially, maybe the guide can help you, or the senior PhD students in the lab can help you or guide you. But eventually, it is you who has to learn the interpretation of your own results. The research interprets the analyzed data to understand patterns, relationships, and findings. Then, testing of hypothesis. The hypothesis is tested to determine whether it is accepted or rejected based on the results. But one should not feel, unhappy that my hypothesis could not be proven. After all, you worked for your research plan and you came to a conclusion that it doesn't work that way. So that itself is a piece of knowledge which can be added to the existing knowledge, saying that it does not work in this manner. So, any result, whether it is positive or negative, is not useless. It is quite useful because it is adding new knowledge to the existing knowledge. Then comes steps in research methodology. The seventh step is data analysis. Organize, process, and analyze using data by statistical tool. That is, you can use SPSS, Excel, or R for quantitative research, coding, thematic analysis for qualitative research. Interpretation of such results relate finding back to hypotheses or objectives. Discuss implications, unexpected outcomes, and theoretical contributions. So, suppose if it is a qualitative research design, then also you have to prove your hypothesis or objectives. And you can do that. You can sometimes get an unexpected outcome, but you have to still prove it through your logical and theoretical contributions why and how this happened. And then comes report writing and presentation. Prepare a structured research report including introduction, methodology, results and discussion, and finally conclusion. Use appropriate citation and reference style. We will go into the detail of these things when we are doing report writing lecture, because it is completely to be understood in a very clear manner what are the procedures of writing a good report or a presentation. And therefore, we will spend special time, a separate lecture on that. Report writing and presentation. Now, in this lecture also, we will be talking about report writing and presentation. The final step is documenting the research in the form of a research report, thesis, or paper. It usually includes an introduction. Of course, there has to be a title, undoubtedly. Then methodology, then results, then discussing those results, which is under the section of discussion, and then comes conclusion, and finally the references. What are the references that you have mentioned in your paper, based on which the prior work that has been done in the topic of your selection is mentioned? In short, research methodology follows a systematic path from identifying a problem to reporting the findings. If you want, you can also explain the characteristic of good research methodology. Flow chart of research methodology steps often is asked in the exam. People will say, okay, what is the flow chart of research methodology? And this is a very favorite question of the examiner to ask, because this is also very basic. You have to understand that these topics have to be in alignment. You can't do report writing before doing the discussion. You can't do discussion prior to your results and discussion, and so on and so forth. So everything has to fall in place in its order: introduction, methodology, research, discussion, conclusion, and then referencing. That is how it should be written. Now, the step is conclusion and recommendation. Summarize key findings, provide recommendations for practice, policy, and future research. Many a times, we give a futuristic approach from the conclusions that we have drawn from our research. And that drives the whole pattern into a finale. Then validation and verification. Ensure reliability and validity of data and instruments. You may include pilot studies or triangulation in qualitative research. So what it means that having written the conclusion, finally you validate your results or substantiate your results by putting a graph or by giving some instrumental data, like if you are using FTIR and UV visible spectrophotometer, you can give the spectra, or you can, if you are using chromatography, you can put the chromatogram to substantiate how you concluded that this was the result. So, validation and verification is also a very integral part of research methodology. Now let us pay a little attention to the most important thing that a researcher has to do. That is doing a thorough scientific literature survey. Literature survey is not merely a search made in internet or Google search. The reason is Google search engine is going to look at private websites of various individuals. Whereas by literature survey, what we basically mean is a survey of technical literature that is of authoritative in nature, pertaining to scientific enterprise that is going on across the world in universities, research labs, and so on. Now, just depending on Google search is not enough. And this I had mentioned even in lecture number 2. We have to look for literature survey from the individual publications which have been published by good researchers in peer-reviewed journals. And some of them, the subscriptions are very high, like ScienceDirect.com or SciFinder. And not all colleges and universities can afford it. So there is also a common or easily accessible Sci-Hub. But of course, some of the latest literature is not available. So one has to really take a lot of pain to go through the literature very carefully in order to check whether the plan that you have proposed has been covered by anybody else or not. If it has been covered, then it is of no use to pursue that plan. You will have to make a new plan. That is why, prior to making the plan, it is important to do scientific literature survey. So, essentially, the first requirement that we need to do is that every scientist cannot replicate the entire history of how a particular topic has evolved. So, we must use approaches that are going beyond what others have done till now, which means that we must know what others have used, what kind of approaches people have used, where are the gaps that can come up or can be filled. So only that unknown area, that virgin thought, is where you can work and make your research plan. If it has already been done, then it is of no consequence that you do the same work and land up doing the same, getting the same result, and it has already been published. So you will not be allowed to even publish that. So it is of no use at all. Familiarity in novelty required for research. So this word novelty is very important, where it is that we can contribute, how we can contribute in scientific arena. These are some very, very basic questions that a researcher must ask. And then, what is the difference that we are making to the existing knowledge? And very often, a very novel technique used in a very familiarized area would be a good addition to the literature. So, it has to have its uniqueness or novelty. Otherwise, it is like repeating somebody else's work, which is of no consequence, I have just told a while ago. And sometimes a very familiar technique used in a totally novel area of research would also be valuable, which means that if you are trying to bring in some new technique, or you are using a known technique for in an unknown area, that could bring in a new and valuable knowledge. So novelty in familiarity as well as familiarity in novelty is required for you to know what is familiar and what is novel. And therefore literature survey is not only necessary but is a must. A thorough literature survey is a must, because unless and until we are very careful about what we want to do, how we want to do, it will not be of any consequence in the actual scenario. To avoid duplication. Now, as I told you that already if a work is done, if you repeat the same work, it is duplication. So one has to avoid duplication. So it is important to avoid duplication, and it is also important to clarify certain controversial results that may be coming up. And if you want to know what is the state of the art in the literature that is currently there, and we want to extend and build on the work of others, definitely we need to know what is done till now. So already, suppose somebody has done a synthesis with methyl group, and then you just extend it and make it ethyl group. What's the big deal? There is nothing new in that. You are doing the same reaction, only changing the starting material. Now, it is a very, very predictable kind of thing. If methyl has worked, ethyl also will work. Now, that is not going to add any new knowledge to the existing knowledge. Instead, if somebody has used ethyl and you have used a chloro compound of that same material, then they are different. Their chemistry is different. Their reactivities are different. Definitely, they will lead to different products. And that is what is important, that one should avoid duplication. Literature survey should help us in getting that status quo of the subject which we are trying to do research on. Literature survey, that way, is a very important aspect. It should be done not only at the beginning of the research, but also throughout. But in the beginning, of course, it is mandatory. And I'll give you a small example. What happens that research is going on world over. What you plan today And while you are executing and doing that reaction, it could be that the same reaction could have been done by somebody in maybe Germany or US. And they have published it already before you could finish your experiments and publish. Now, therefore, it is continuously important to keep looking at literature every day or every week to see whether or not your particular problem has been dealt or published by anybody else. Otherwise, having waited till the end and then publishing it or preparing a manuscript for publication and only realizing that it has been already done by X or Y researcher will be of total waste of time. So, therefore, not only avoiding duplication but also continuously keeping an eye on the literature of your domain only is equally important. Duplication is not acceptable. Literature survey in the context of making a PhD thesis or a research based degree is important because very often the research degrees are given based upon original work that is done by the student. And duplication is not acceptable even if it is not intentional. So it is important to know what is out there. What have people done elsewhere in the world of the research area that we are working on? And just now I explained this to you that it is very, very important to keep a very keen eye on what is happening. And then only you can be sure that yes, my area has not been covered by anybody so far. Knowledge of the topic that we are working on are okay. And sometimes it is important to establish the context of your work, and it's most important to have a background. And also to point out anomalies and gaps, we must know what has been done till now. So, in the context of research, thesis, also research analysis and literature survey is very important. So, by now you would have understood that why, in order to avoid duplication, one has to do a thorough literature survey. Very often, we have various ways, and I am going to look at them in one by one manner. The first way is obviously what is available for everyone in the world, which is open access. Unfortunately, the cost of keeping a journal publication or a conference proceeding in an archival manner that is available in reproducible manner over a long period of time is going to make the respective publisher spend money for that. And so we have some sources like open access sources. And therefore, open access, that is publicly available information from scientific archival data, is very limited because it involves money. But definitely, they are increasing in number as we go along. So, open access is very much available, and we will see what kind of journals are available under open access, which means that there is a subscription cost associated with every journal access. So they have, because they have spent money in preserving and archiving these journals, they are now charging from the subscriber. Other literature sources are, and of late, there has been also an effort to use some of the possibilities of authors being allowed to share their own publication on a portal, where upon request, it is possible to have the literature shared. So these are called peer sharing sources, and they are ResearchGate, Academia Edu are very important such peer sharing sources which also may be available and provide some amount of literature. We can look at periodicals, research reports, conference proceedings, official publications, standards, theses, dissertations, etc. So, through ResearchGate and Academia Edu, just like open access, one can see some good research papers through these portals as well. Sometimes even publications that are going to come up in future can also act as a source of literature. We must of course have pointer to refer to them so that whenever they are complete, bibliographic details are available. We will be able to update them in our document. So what it means that constant vigilance on the literature sources is very important and mandatory for every researcher. Then let us look at some of the secondary sources for literature survey. And there are many such secondary sources of literature, such as compilation of work done, reviews, reference books, handbooks, etc. Textbooks, monographs, and abstracting services. All these can be also acting as literature surveys. And tertiary sources like dictionaries, yearbooks, bibliographies, list of secondary sources also can be used as source of literature. Now, ISBN, this is International Standard Book Number. So when we go ahead with literature survey, we must be familiar with some terminology. Every book that we want to refer to must contain what is called the ISBN number or the International Standard Book Number. This number is basically going to allow anybody in the world to identify the book and also possibly source it if it is available in print. Any book that does not have an ISBN number is essentially not traceable after some time. And it is important to note it down whenever we want to refer to a book. So, if you are referring a book, remember to note down the ISBN number because that is a kind of a nomenclature that is assigned to a book, just the way we have nomenclature for organic compounds. World over, everybody will call that compound by that IUPAC nomenclature. Similarly, International Standard Book Number is meant for books. Then there is something called ISSN. Similarly, any journal that we want to refer should have an ISN number. These are also applicable for newspapers. And ISSN number is going to be in ranges. We must pay attention to this when we are also referring to conference proceedings, which will usually have an ISSN number. Then comes DOI, Digital Object Identifier. DOI in today's world, in the digital world, is very important. We would like to have an identity for each document such that we will be able to access them directly. So if you know the DOI number, then you can access the journal through Sci-Hub, etc. Because that is a kind of a address for that particular research paper. So if you have the proper address, DOI number, you can actually click on that and be able to at least see the abstract of the paper, if not the full paper. So every document that is available online in the literature, open literature, will definitely have a DOI number, which is Digital Object Identifier. Tracing DOI and impact factor. Because how do we look for it? Now, this is a very, very easy question, at the same time very sounding like a lame question, but it is equally important to know how to look for it, because a beginner will not know how to trace DOI number. So there is an agency which translates the DOI number into URL, where that particular full text source is available. And whenever the full text source moves, the mapping will be modified by the agency, DOI agency. And therefore, we will be able to access the sources as the source keeps moving its actual location. And that means that if you are going to refer to an outline source, it may make sure that you have a DOI number for the particular resource so that you can refer to it by that number. Now, I think by now DOI number, ISN number, ISSN numbers are clear to you, because this is how we look for literature, good literature, how they can be traced. Sometimes, you read it once and then you forget. So if you have noted down the DOI number, you can always trace it back as many times as you want to for referring to your literature. Then comes impact factor. There are some other things that must be known to the researcher. We must be aware of while doing literature survey. One such thing is journal's impact factor. What we mean by journal's impact factor is that to see how many times the article in a particular journal are being referred by other journals and other articles. It basically gives you a sense of how often these articles are being read and being used by other scientists. So impact factor is how popular is your lecture or your paper or your conference proceeding, and how many people have mentioned that in their papers. That will give the impact factor to the journal, because it is in that journal that it was published. So what it means is that if you want to compare two journals in a particular area, then one with the higher impact factor is being assessed, read and referred more often. And this is a number which is very controversial. One cannot compare these impact factors across research areas. So this is pertaining to that particular paper, not that research area. So these are different things which should not be confused with. Citation index and H index. As a researcher, you should know what is citation index and what does H index mean. Citation index, there is also something called citation index, which is nothing but how many times that article in the journal has been cited by other researchers. When we say some articles are cited very highly, what does that mean? It means that that particular paper has been mentioned in that many articles in different journals, could be same journal, could be different journal, which means that it is a popular article. What we mean by this is that there is an article that has been referred by so many people, maybe hundreds, that you could now call it as a classic. And citation is basically how many times it has been referred by other successful journal publications. Now let us understand what is H index. H index is something, again, a controversial index. It basically refers to how many times a particular author's publication has been cited and how many of them exceed the number of publication. That is basically when we say that an author has an H index of, say, N, then he has N papers that are cited N times or more. So which means that how many times one paper has been cited and how many such papers you have which have been cited several times. So all put together, it gives an H index to that author. So citation index and the H index are pertaining to the author. Now, what are the major strategies of literature search? There are three major strategies that we can use to search literature. The first strategy is basically using a keyword. What we mean by a keyword search is using a word to identify the topic of research result that we are looking for, or to use the author's name. We could also use a keyword that is mentioned by the article itself. So essentially, it is like coming up with words that would describe and identify a particular research paper, and which means that there are variants that may be available that point to the same article. So, for example, I will just explain. If I am writing a paper on dyeing of silk fabric with natural dyes, I will put natural dyes, I will put dyeing, and I will put silk as keywords. So when I am putting these keywords to look for literature, all those who have used natural dyes for silk fabric can be identified. And this is how we keep looking at the literature. Chronological search. There is also two ways of searching, what is called the backward chronology search and a forward chronological search. What we mean by these two will be evident as we do the searching when we go ahead with the demonstration. Citation is something that is going to be playing a role in the forward chronological search. Chronological literature survey, backward and forward. These are two different ways. Backward is when the backward chronological search, basically what it means is that we are going to look at an article and see what are all the papers that it is referring to, which will be basically older than the article. And then look at among those references what are relevant for that topic, and then going back recursively back in time. So this way, actually, we go on and discover the entire background of a particular research area. Whereas forward chronological search is something that works in different manner. We basically first identify a very important paper in our area of research, and then we will see what all these publications are citing this particular paper, which means that they are going to come in the future. In the sense, let us say we have identified a very good paper in 1994. Then all those papers that are published after 94, which are referring to this particular paper, and among those, there will be some which will be very relevant to us. And then we are going to pick them, and then we will see which of the papers after those have cited those particular papers. And that way we can go forward in time. So I think a forward chronological search is a far better method than the backward one. But nevertheless, since we are learning about chronological literature survey, it is important to understand that even that is very important. Now, important sources of literature source are that there are two major sources. One is the Thomson ISI Company's Web of Science, and the other one is Scopus. And these two are seen as most popular resources of information for citation. But of course, we have ScienceDirect.com, we have SciFinder, and many others. And therefore, these sources require institutes affiliation. One cannot connect to these sources directly. Major publishers, roughly about 80% of the publications in the journal forms are done by a very limited number of companies that I have listed here. It could be Elsevier, Springer, together. They take up the majority of the journal publication in the world. Then there is Taylor Francis Group, Nature Publication Group, Manet Publication, and then there are a large number of journals that are published by societies like American Physical Society, American Institute of Physics, American Chemical Society, and so on and so forth. So there are journals that are published by societies, and they are also publishing houses. So what we understand from here, that there is enough resources that are available. Now let us look at literature review. A literature review involves searching, reading, analyzing, evaluating, and summarizing. The steps are: first, before we even start looking for literature review, we start looking at defining the research question. Then identify database and keywords. Conduct literature search as per what we discussed just now. Evaluate the sources. Synthesize and analyze the results. Outline the structure. Write the literature review and refine and edit the review. And that's how literature review is concluded. Key consideration in literature reviewing. First is purpose of review. Consider what is the review that will be useful for your purpose, whether it is research paper, dissertation, grant proposal. Then inclusion and exclusion criteria. Decide on specific criteria you will use, whether you want to use a publication date or a study type, and so on. You have to also decide on scholarly sources, whether you want to give focus on credible sources such as peer-reviewed journals or reputed websites and so on. Organization and structure. So, and citing the reference in a consistent citation style. We will spend some time separately on this style of referencing. So, meticulous steps for literature survey is to define the research question, include and determine the inclusion and exclusion criteria, choose database and conduct the research, review your results in a very positive manner, in a very that there should not be any duplication in the research search also. Synthesize the information that has been gathered, analyze the information that has been gathered, and write the literature review. Pick an organizational structure, that is theme, approaches, concept, methodologies. Organize your citation and focus on the research question and pertinent studies. And then you have to just compile them. 5 key steps to writing a literature review is that you have to remember: search for relevant literature, evaluate sources, identify themes, debates, and gaps, outline the structure, write your literature review based on the above topics that have been mentioned. Now, what does this mean? This means that when you are writing down your literature review part in your research paper, you have to do a thorough work of first literature survey. So that search should be very, very thorough. Once you have searched, and then comes evaluating these resources, you should always refer to papers which are actually from good journals, peer reviewed journals, because there is a lot of literature which is available in the internet. Nobody has authenticated it, nobody has verified it. So many false results are also mentioned. Not everything that is written in Google is 100% correct. Some things are not very correct. I will not mention what are those things in order to get into any kind of debate, but definitely Google is not a very honest kind of resource. Sometimes some extraneous things are written which are unnecessary. Hence, we cannot rely on that. We have to rely on sources which are authentic and which have been peer reviewed. Identify theme, debates, and gaps, and then write the structure. Now, how to organize the literature? For organizing the literature, arrange the studies in a logical order, and the logical order, some of the common ways are chronological order, thematic order, or methodological order. To write a review, following points are important. The literature review should have 3 main parts. One is the introduction, second is the main body, and third is the way it has to be written down. In order to organize the literature, one has to write in one style. For example, if I am mentioning a paper by Wankar and Tiwari, I should write the year in the parenthesis and then write the name of the paper. Natural dyes showed improved dye uptake when eco-friendly auxiliaries were used. However, other researchers reported limitations and in color fastness. So, when we are writing, we have to stick to a style of writing or writing the bibliography. Cite all sources properly. Ensure academic integrity and avoid plagiarism. Again and again, we are mentioning in every other lecture about plagiarism because that is to be avoided completely. Use a proper referencing style, either APA style or MLA style or Harvard style or Chicago style. Then one style only has to be adapted in one paper. You can't have different style in the same paper. This ensures academic integrity. The key characteristic of good literature review is relevant to the research topic, analytical rather than descriptive, includes recent and credible sources, clearly identifies research gaps, and properly referenced. So we now understand that there is a huge importance of literature review. It provides context, it identifies the gap, justifies the research, informs methodology, and therefore we have to stick to the fact that we should avoid duplication, support hypothesis, and build up existing work. By engaging an existing research, you can build upon the findings of previous studies, furthering the advancement of knowledge in your field. Which means that so and so work like this. However, what we have done is an improvement on the existing method, and therefore it is adding a new knowledge to the existing knowledge. This way, we are mentioning what others have done, but we are also mentioning that our method has either reduced the time or improved the yield or any feature which was not existing in the previous study is highlighted and has been looked upon by your contribution in the research area. Now, that is a very significant portion of your research contribution. So, in conclusion, we can say that literature review is a critical foundation of any research work, offering a comprehensive overviewing of existing knowledge, theories, methodologies, and gap in field. It helps researchers to understand what has already been studied, identify the gaps or inconsistencies in current knowledge, build a conceptual framework, and refine research questions based on those gaps, avoid duplication and ensure originality, justify the need for their study, and guide methodology choices. A well conducted literature review not only situates the research within the academic conversation but also strengthens the credibility and relevance of the study. As such, it is not merely a summary of previous work but an analytical, evaluative, integrative process that sets the stage for meaningful research. So, with this, we have come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.